Hi, welcome. This is part 19, chapter 7. This is the chapter that was missed out of part 19, the womb healing decree. So it was interesting because I missed it and I didn't realize it until after I filmed. And when I thought about filming it right away, but then actually I realized maybe I wasn't complete. Maybe there were some experiences that needed to come through. And that's exactly what happened. So I'll kind of talk about my experiences. So as light workers, so star seeds, sensitives, empaths, people that really are dedicated to like consciousness. They're here to awaken their consciousness in 3D density, in the 3D material plane, the densest system, you know, that we know of. And awakening is the hardest, but we've always had way showers, other light workers that have come on Earth in 3D density to kind of show us, how to awaken our consciousness in a 3D body. And some of those examples to me are like Yeshua, which would have been Jesus in the crucifixion timeline, but he was a light worker. And Miriam was a light worker. She incarnated at 9D to have a 7D baby, Yeshua. And Mary Magdalene, Yeshua's a partner, but also as a teacher herself and awakening consciousness herself. She was erased, but people are remembering her now. It was Mary Magdalene. So we had different way showers, like we had Krishna, we had Buddha, and then many that are not famous, but that came here to anchor a frequency, a consciousness, a source consciousness connection in a dense system of 3D to help us remember who we are and remember to awaken if we choose, right? It's a choice. And so for me, this process of this womb healing decree, it came through first a client, and we did it for her. And then a few weeks later, it felt relevant to me. And then I did it. And then this is the process of me kind of putting it all together. So for me, the womb, we are all born through a womb unless you are an NPC. So NPCs are like the Cabbage Patch children that were kind of sent around 100 to 150 years ago. And they were transported in the mail, the post office. They were transported on trains and boats, and they were kind of spread around and they just appeared out of nowhere, and then people that questioned that ended up in asylums. So that's kind of the background. But so we're all born out of a womb unless you are a reptilian and unless you are a NPC, a non-player character. So, oh, that was just my crystal that fell. Interesting. So the womb, we all come through a womb, unless reptilians, they end up going into a body that does have a source spark, but because of trauma or something happened, they were basically they were taken over kind of by a reptilian, and a reptilian lives inside of them. So they kind of like take over bodies and then they're shapeshifters. I know it sounds very sci-fi, but if you're here in part 19 of the decree, we're going into the depths of things. I wouldn't have done this decree at the beginning. So when we're thinking about the womb, we usually think about our mothers, but then if we're women, we're also thinking about when we first started menstruating. And so for me, when I started menstruating, I was 12. I think I was in grade 7. And I had this idea that came into my consciousness that every time I menstruate, I am kind of like making a donation or a connection to Mother Earth. And that's kind of how I've seen my menstrual cycle my entire life. And I always saw it as a way of replenishment and renewal, and also, but mostly connection with Mother Earth. So New Earth, and then New Earth is like the sacred garden. And then I always had a really kind of on time menstrual cycle. And in 2008, I think I was like 38 years old. And was sick for a few days, and then I was gray, and then I couldn't stand up. And I had a really high fever, and I didn't know what was going on. And I went to the hospital, and I had appendicitis. So there was like an infection moving through my system. And, but my appendix was um, I guess, had an infection. And so they couldn't remove the appendix right away because they had to deal with like the infection was going kind of all over. But at the same time in 2008, when that happened, it also was so shocking because I didn't really have any medical problems like that with my organs. And then I also never wanted to give up any of my organs. I didn't want any of my organs to get sick. So I was like quite upset. And then, but at the same time, I was able to really crystal clear see everybody around me. Like it was really weird. It was almost like I had like an enlightening moment of a big awakening shift in that moment. And then at one point, all the doctors and nurses were around my bed in the middle of the night. And I said, it's okay. I've decided to live and I'm going to have a baby. And then I'm going to live. And then they were like, oh, okay. Anyway, so I was 38 years old. So, and it took a while to heal from that. And but then I did I tried once actually in my life to get pregnant, and I had the call to get pregnant, and then I tried once to get pregnant, and I got pregnant in 2010, and I heard a voice when I woke up, and the voice said, don't worry, the baby's healthy, it's going to be easy baby, easy pregnancy, easy birth, and just relax, like enjoy yourself. And it literally I think I was like the most blissed out pregnant person. I don't know. It was not the fake oxytocin, but the real oxytocin. And I was so joyful, like, but I feel like that was the essence of the baby. The baby had that essence and it was giving, I was like sharing in the essence of the baby. And the baby it was, born like in 8 hours natural birth, like at home. So I went into labor, I think at 7:30 and gave birth at 3:30 and like no complications. It was just exactly what my dream said, like easy baby, easy birth. And he naturally has kind of unfolded in his life really beautifully. And so don't ever think that anybody is in charge of your womb. You're in charge of your womb. I was 48 when I have had him, and um, I'm 57 now, and it's 2026, and I still have my menstrual cycle. So I think I'm at the end of it. So probably 58 years old will be like the end. But I saw it as my kind of like connection or donation or reclamation is another word that's coming through in connecting to Mother Earth. And my higher self has told me, you can let go of your cycle, you don't have to keep it. But I felt like it was like I always felt it was important to me and it was like an important transmission. And so that's kind of like my overall philosophy of like the womb. And also when I got pregnant, I decided, and then I tried once to get pregnant and I got pregnant. And I've never been pregnant before. I didn't even know if I could be pregnant before because I was 38 and everybody told me, well, you probably won't be able to get pregnant. And I thought, no, I have an excellent like relationship with my menstrual cycle. I have an excellent relationship with Mother Earth. So yeah, so even now in 2026, I still feel it's about transformation and it's like a transmission comes through, like a deep connection from Mother Earth and then into my body. So that's kind of like the things that were circling around me as I was writing the womb healing decree. But it's mostly just to like for women to know that it's not hopeless. and just because people are telling you, I had lots of people tell me stuff about when I was pregnant, and I had the easiest pregnancy, and all I heard were horror stories. All I heard was terrifying things that would happen and what would happen. And I had no interventions. I had nothing happen. He breastfed within like, I don't know, 10 minutes of being born. And then it was no problem. So all the things I was told constantly for decades to be afraid of or that would happen, like none of it happened. Like none of it. So, have confidence in your connection to your body, have confidence in your connection to your higher self and also your connection to source and Mother Earth. And so when I was writing this decree and wondering about it, so I got like these bites around my belly button, and it was on the right side, so the divine feminine side. And it was like a half circle around my belly button. And my belly button is actually where they removed the appendix. So I had to get my appendix removed. And what I learned about that was in 2025, so close to the end of 2025, so in December, I was anchoring fully embodying 5D. And what I learned about fully embodying in 5D is that we need to kind of understand our whole kind of this life, like understand why certain things happened. And what I learned about the appendix is that it had to be removed because it connected with the matrilineal line of this life, of the mother this life. Well, my mother this life was part of the dark triad. She's a Draco reptilian. She's passed away. She's died. And she was a psychopath. And she literally was the worst person I've ever met in her entire life. Like she literally did not stop being a psychopath to the very end. And the appendix needed to be removed because it would have interfered with the consciousness of the baby that was coming in. And so he is incarnated at 7D. And so the appendix and the matrilineal line of the mother needed to be removed, where my dad was an empath and his mother was an empath. So essentially they were light workers they wouldn't have used those words. So the appendix in 2008, if I wanted to have a baby, had to be removed. And that's what I learned. And that, a dragonfly just came to the window. Nice. So, so that's what I learned about the appendix, but I didn't know that until December 2025. I needed to understand in order to fully embody and anchor in 5D that I needed to understand why the appendix was removed because a part of me felt badly that I had to remove one of my organs. So yeah, and maybe you can relate to this. I'm not sure, but maybe you can relate to it as well. And at first, I wanted to call this decree the womb reclamation decree. We're reclaiming our wombs, but the wombs of all time space. We're reclaiming the divine feminine. We're reclaiming what our wombs are actually capable of, what our menstrual cycles are capable of. We can give life. And then there's also a creative process of giving life. Like it might not be a baby, but it might be a book. It might be a business. It might be something that you're teaching. There's different ways of creating. And that's why this isn't just for women. This is for like creating in the 3D, like in the material plane, but creating with consciousness. And so this decree was published on the womb healing decree on the 11th of July, 2026. So the decree started kind of rolling together. So on July 7th, 2026, I had a dream that there was an implant inside of me that was the size of a baby, like an 8-month-old baby before it's born in my womb. And the implant was planted at 2 times in my life. So a small implant was planted in 1993. So I think I was about 20 years old. And then another implant was planted in 2020. So 6 years ago. So I would have been like 51. And in both of those time frames, I was in a dysfunctional relationship with a reptilian. And so I didn't even know what reptilians were till 2022. I knew the dark triad, the dark triad. I knew what the psychopath, sociopath, narcissist was, but um, I didn't know what reptilians were. I could see them, but I didn't know what I was seeing. I didn't understand. So in the dream, I dreamt there was an implant inside of me the size of a baby. And I kept looking at my stomach, just thinking my stomach was getting bigger and bigger, and that I looked 8 months pregnant. Because if I do gain weight, it is on my hips and my bum, but usually not on my stomach. So, but my stomach was getting bigger and bigger and bigger. And I was like, wow, like what's happening with my stomach? I literally looked like I was pregnant. So, but I learned that there was two implants. So one implant, installation is another word, was in 2020. And then the earlier one was 1993, but it was smaller. Okay, so the night of so that night I had done the womb healing decree for myself. And my birth time didn't burn 3 times. It was like a tiny piece of paper, but I exactly had my birth time and it would not burn 3 times, but I made sure that it burned. And then I felt like it was so smoky and it was like hurt my eyes. And then my stomach felt really sick when I did the decree. And then as soon as I finished the decree, I had to rush and go to the bathroom. So I know it's too much information, TMI, but our body literally is expelling this from our body, right? Our body is physically expelling this from our bodies. And we are going to have physical responses. So we're going to have runny noses or tears or rashes, or like our body is going to expel this out of our body. Going to the bathroom, sneezing, coughing, eyes watering, hiccups. Um, yeah. And then the crows were cawing outside like so loud when that was happening, when I was doing the expulsion. And then also while I was reading my decree, there was this sports car outside, and the engine was revving so loud. Like there's no cars really at the back part of where I live, so I don't know where that car would have had to be to rev so loud. Um, okay, so that was the 7th of July, and the decree was published on the 11th of July. So we're getting there. And then on July 8th, 2026, I had another womb dream. So I was in an executive suite in a hotel, and then all these people were in my suite. They were like 5 people playing cards, like at a table. There were other people sitting on the sofa, drinking, smoking, like partying, listening to music. It was like a party recreation room. They were using it. And it was like my hotel suite. And I asked to speak to the manager. And then I asked, is this a representation of my womb? Is this what my womb looks like? Like, is it just completely taken over? And what I learned is that the exes can open up a portal, and it's not a good portal. So when you're in a dysfunctional relationship and you're in a relationship with a psychopath, sociopath, narcissist, I am so sorry. There is nothing worse for an empath, light worker, starseed than having a relationship with the dark triad. It is disgusting. It is horrific. There is nothing but lying, cheating, and stealing. And it is gross. They are so gross. So without the details, because who cares about the details? Anyways, all we know is that it's gross and it's horrific and they're hard to get rid of, right? They're very obsessed. And so in those times I would have said like I was up close with Darth Vader is like kind of how I described like psychopath, sociopath, narcissist, the dark triad, or the Draco reptilians and the reptilians. I would have kind of thought of them as like Darth Vader, but they are the Draco reptilians, they are the reptilians, and they are the dark triad. So what I learned was that the equipment gets installed through the dysfunctional relationships, and that opens a portal. And that's how it looks in the womb. Random people just showing up and hanging out, using the space and resources, no consent. Somebody invited them in is the answer, so no permission, just the door open. And it was open to dysfunctional relationships and dysfunctional experiences, not just with personal relationships. It could have been like, a dysfunctional situation that happened at the grocery store with a person or at work or, but they open up that portal of dysfunction to make sure that you stay in low 3D. And that's how the 4D Anunnaki operate. The door would have been open in the dysfunctional relationship, and they would loosely use that as consent. In the womb healing decree, we're closing all the doors, all of them, and the portals, and emphatically stating that inferred consent is not consent and all must go. And they must go now. Expulsion. Okay. So in the decree, when I filmed the decree, I filmed it on the 9th of July, 2026, and then it was posted on the 11th of July, 2026. And so in the decree, I actually name Yaldabaoth by name. So Yaldabaough. He is one of the 3D rulers of the material plane. They kind of all, what I've learned is have sections. They have sections of what they control. And so Yaldabaoth controls kind of like as you're awakening in consciousness, like 5D and beyond, like Yaldabaoth works really hard to get you to not anchor in 5D, is how I understand it. And so I had named Yaldabaoth in the revoke section. And then when I looked at the playback of what I filmed, when I was spelling Yaldabaoth in the video from Zoom, it froze. And then there was this little message from Zoom saying we could not complete the filming. And then I was like, no, like, no, I claimed this decree, the womb healing decree in Source's name. I claimed the equipment in Source's name. I claimed the computer in Source's name. And so I heard, what I see is I heard from my higher self. My higher self said, turn it off and restart it. And then I turned it off and I restarted it and it was there. So I don't know if that's magical thinking, but that's what happened. So that's what I heard. I heard just restart it and it will be there. And I restarted and it was there. So I then felt like very tired because actually I found that quite shocking because it was exactly frozen when I was spelling out Yaldabaoth. And then I thought, oh, that's the temper tantrums, right? From 4D. Those are the tech temper tantrums. So I felt really tired. I lay down for a nap and I woke up with a word really loud in my ear and it said expulsion. That's it, just one word, expulsion. And I had to run to the toilet and off went the installation. So I heard it's complete. So done. Okay, so that's kind of like a process of seeing, and then of course, the conscious mind is like, oh, well, it's just made up. It's like, really? Well, you're made up. The ego literally is an installation. Like we are multidimensional beings, and it's supposed to be our natural state that we listen to and hear our higher selves. That is like normal. Like 5D, that's like regular. It's not even special. So, and then on the 10th of July, 2026, so one day before publishing the decree on YouTube on the 11th, I dreamt that the body is like a diamond and it needs pressure to purge. And the decree creates the pressure and the purge happens easily. And so this has been my process. And this is what it's like to be a light worker. When we clear for ourselves and describe our experience, it is not about being selfish. It is so that others can relate because our information is not mainstream, right? Expelling installations is not mainstream, but when we clear for ourselves and hear situations described of others' expulsion and we can relate, then we don't feel alone. Because we're constantly told we're selfish by the dark triad because they need us to sacrifice ourselves. They need our consciousness, our source spark connection. We don't need them at all. We could actually have not one more experience with the dark triad, psychopath, sociopath, narcissist, reptilian, Draco reptilian, and we would have an amazing life. But they need us because they do not have any energy. They need our energy. Our light is too much. They can't process our light, but they need our energy and they need us to stay low, scared, terrified, even better, traumatized, even better. But we're saying no and we're revoking them in the womb healing decree. Right? So for light workers to step into their own expression, the interference needs to be seen, it needs to be named, and it needs to be expelled with your consent, right? It's very important that it's your consent, your words, you're writing the decree, you're speaking the decree, and you're burning the decree, and your records are getting updated. Right? So the decree really is a process of restoring your sovereignty, reclaiming your personal power, and clearing energetic interference. So it's affecting your womb, but what is the womb? The womb is your creative life force. So it is really affecting your life force and your creativity, and also your agency to create in this world, to create a business, to create a book. Right? I was told in sessions, we all have one book at least in us because 3D Earth has been so convoluted and they've destroyed so many of the books. So our experience matters. And also expressing it if we so choose, right? Like lots of people would never want to choose to do YouTube videos, but many do. And I would say do it. If you're thinking about writing the book, write the book. And then, right now, what's available is an extra code of shielding. That's what it's called. So you can just say higher self. I'm asking for an extra code of shielding through the heart source. And it's like a living plasma kind of crystalline living field around us, like a field. And so we can see more clearly, have more discernment, and get through 3D, the material plane, more easily. And being able to stabilize our frequency at 5D at heart-based frequency source connection. And then as another reminder, before going to bed, call in your higher self, only source aligned, state your intention for your sleep. If you want like any energy clearing, like I kept asking, what's going on with my stomach? Like, what's going on? Like, what is going on? Then I finally got my answer. And then only call in those with benevolent nature, only source aligned, guides, only source aligned, higher self, only source aligned. And then declare that your space is yours in source's name. And sometimes, we'll get, pushback, but just hold firm. Like 5D frequency is very hard to interfere with when you stabilize and stay in 5D frequency no matter what. So good job. Take care of yourselves. Self-care is really important. Going into presence and staying in presence through the heart is really important. The fast track is being in nature because nature, the flowers, the plants, the trees, the animals, they're naturally in 5D. You know, 5D is the sacred garden. So thank you for being here. And we'll see you in the next one. From my heart to yours.